Welcome to the Paramedia Podcast with Mukunda. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Paramedia Podcast. Once again, we are kicking it off with another live stream with our co-hosts Vinit and KingKong. And today we're going to do some philosophy again on epistemology and Pramana. So hey Vinit, hey KingKong, how you guys doing?
Hey,
I'm doing good, Mukunda.
how are you
Awesome.
guys?
Good. This is
How are you
it's
guys,
good.
Vinit? Mukunda?
Yeah, doing well, man. It's episode 2 live stream, which will be really fun and exciting. Vinith, how's your week?
After the video, it was good. People have been commenting and they have been giving feedbacks about how to go about the next videos. One thing that me is speak
You got to
from
keep the mic a little closer because otherwise you get back and forth. Yeah, keep the mic a little closer.
Now is it clear?
Yeah, it's better.
Yes, I was saying that one feedback that I got was speak from your diaphragm. So I'm gonna do that in this video.
Yeah, good. How about you, KingKong?
Yeah, it was good. I got some feedbacks from the previous stream that we did, positive ones. So yeah, looking forward to today's stream, and especially I want to know today about your views on this topic. I feel you have a lot to share about the Pramanas, etc.
Well, I mean, I have things to share. I just don't know if they're very good. We'll find out. So we have some slides and stuff we want to share, but we also want to have a conversation. You guys want to first, I think it might make sense for our listeners. You guys want to first say what a pramana is? Vinith, go ahead.
Yeah. Just before that, I want to check. Like, do you guys hear any music? Are you guys hearing any music? I
No.
don't know. No, it's all good.
Yeah.
Okay. Then maybe there's something. I don't know. I am probably it's being streamed on my channel.
Yeah, you might want to turn off the music on your channel if your channel's open. Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Sorry, everyone. There's a little couple technical difficulties. We're going to live stream also on Vinith's channel.
Okay, it's good now.
All right, great. Yeah. So, what is what is pramana?
No, Mukunda, can you give me a minute? I mean, I don't know why this thing keeps going on the music, even though I closed YouTube. They're coming from my side.
Yeah, we don't hear music on our end.
Just in a minute, I'll fix it.
Yeah, sure. All right. So, why don't you mute yourself, and then I'll mute you right now, and then when you're ready, just come, unmute yourself. KingKong, what's a pramana, man?
So I'm audible, right?
Yep.
Okay. So by pramana, I think the etymology of the word is pramana, right? The forward or the right measure method, right? Pramana, mana means the measuring or the yardstick, in a way, right? So it's valid means of knowledge, or the valid methods to gain knowledge. What are the valid modes that a sentient being can gain knowledge about reality in its truest sense? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one element, and I think it's important to understand. So, pramana is valid means of knowing, like whether we can use our senses or logic or reason or text or even things like memory and those kind of things. Are those what valid means of knowing? And then the second question I think that's almost important is, are we justified on those beliefs? How do we justify those beliefs, right? I mean, that's how I see it, right?
Yeah, I think. I mean, as we will lead the discussion forward, we will see that there are different domains of pramanas and how they interlock with each other in different in a web pattern, complementing each other, and the different reasons that are given forward, as you said, for those to be justified. Right?
Right.
It's like in Western sense, it's justified true belief. What knowledge is, right?
Right.
So what are the different reasons why these modes of knowing are accepted as pramanas, and the knowledge content, why are they justified? We'll see in the discussion forward. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Vineet.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to work with this background music. It's good, soothing as well. So let's start here. Pramana. How do we define a pramana? The literal meaning would be any means of knowledge or a source of knowledge. So, in Indian philosophy or even in Western philosophy, when you talk about knowledge, you also talk about how do you get knowledge. What are the sources through which you derive knowledge? So,
If you can't hold them, don't move so much and hold the mic closer to you because the sound doesn't come through as strong.
now is it okay?
That's better. Yeah.
Okay, so as I was saying, pramana in Indian philosophy would mean the source of knowledge, or basically the means of knowledge. How do you get knowledge? Where do you get knowledge from? Because in Indian philosophy, whenever you try to talk about metaphysics or ontology, what exists, what does not exist, it starts from you have to first examine how do you even know anything that is metaphysical or anything that is ontological. And this has a very striking similarity with, I think, Kant, or this obsession of Kantian philosophy with trying to understand, analyze the instrument of knowledge first, and then go on to explain the world using that understanding about the instrument of knowledge. So, pramana, to put simply, is basically the means of knowledge, the source of
Sure.
knowledge.
So, real quick, Vineet, your mic goes in and out. I don't know if it's because of where you're holding it. Last time you were fine. So I don't know if there's a difference in your setup because I'm not hearing you as clearly. Am I right, KingKong? He fades in and out.
Is it clear now?
That's clearer, but I think when you move your head and stuff,
All right, I'll try to keep it fixed.
Yeah. I know it's tough. So next time, get a stand. Okay.
I apologize, sir. I don't know what happened to this.
No, it's okay. Okay. So there's a couple. Let's first go through, I think, the Indian framework, and I think from that framework we could then talk about the Western framework, and kind of go through the history, right? In the Indian context, there really pramanas are connected to four things, which is pramata, which is the knower, prameya, which is that which is known, the object of knowledge. The pramana itself, the word pramana itself, is the means of knowing, and then finally the prama is that which is valid knowledge, right? So this is like the structure of these elements. So if you want to think about pramana system, think about who does the knowing, what is knowing, how do they know, and then what is valid in that knowledge, right? So because you can know something, but the knowledge cannot be the same as what you know, right? Like it's the question of, is the knowledge itself valid, right? So like, for example, you might experience, let's use a typical example. I go in the desert, I am parched, I am in a state of being water deprived, and I see a mirage or I see a like, let's say a beautiful lagoon and palm trees, but then I see it. So I am the knower. I see the thing. The thing I see is the mirage. The means of knowing is through my vision. But then it's not valid because when I get there, it's not there. It's a mirage, right? So is that valid cognition or not? So that's kind of what the system of pramana is dealing with. Now, I think we have different schools in the Indian world, right? We have Nyayika school, that's a realist school that sees the world, that approaches Pramana a bit differently than, let's say, Mimamsa school or the Vedanta school, and Buddhists and Jainas and so on. So we'll get into some of that stuff because I think it's very interesting. And on the Western side, right, Western epistemology really is concerned with knowing, but not like this as a process in this exact same way. They're concerned about the justification of knowledge. Like, okay, so I see the thing. How do I know it's a real thing? How do I think about the world in a way that is not just mere experience, but justified in my intellect, right? So, which is a bit different. If you guys want to comment on that, please go ahead.
Yeah, about that example. So a lot of times, I mean, this is generally an accepted view in Indian philosophy, which is illusions, they consist in invalid knowledge. And precisely what you told, the reason being, you see the object, but the object doesn't exist. So it doesn't correspond. Your apprehension of something, of a particular fact, in experience does not correspond to reality. So one of the things that you will derive immediately from this analysis is that in Indian convergent tradition, knowledge is basically correspondence. Or in
Hey,
Sanskrit,
Vinit, it's so sorry for some reason it's very tough to hear you. Can you do headphones instead of the mic? Maybe that will be better.
I'll get back to that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you a second there. King Kong, yeah, do you want to respond to that point I was just making?
Yeah. So regarding regarding the pramanas, I think the what the Indic system or the Astika schools try to do is, I think the primary modes of knowledge would be pratyaksha that they bring in. Now, I don't want to bring in the categories too early, but you gave the example of a mirage on a hot day on the road, right? So how do we understand, right? And I think when he joins, we can discuss more on how different schools explicate and pass out how an illusion or what's the nature of illusion is. But I think what no school can deny at the very basic state is pratyaksha, which is the immediate knowledge through your senses that you get. Now, the results that issue out through or the results that are filtered out through that screen of pratyaksha, how we pass it out, or rather in language when we put it to what objective entity it is referring to, that is where we get into the tangles of it, right? So a realist would say that someone like Nyaya, the Nyaya school, or maybe the Vishishtadvaitin school, that the illusion or the knowledge of the illusion is, in a sense, existent, or the cognition of that is existent. But when you look deep into it, you see that it is rising out of various different factors, right? So so that's what I think, that as we get more depth into the levels of the dimensions of pramanas, I think all the schools start out from pratyaksha. It's like this very basis, the root on which your pramanas tree stands. I think we can discuss forward also how shabda and pratyaksha is also linked in a way. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the traditions, obviously developed separately from each other, right? Like the Indian tradition from the Greek tradition, right? The Western epistemology, in some big sense, developed from let's say, well, the pre-Socratics really didn't have a fixed epistemology. The real first epistemology we really get is from Aristotle, right? And Aristotle's breakdown of his empiricism around the world, right? Which is he analyzes the world and he considers it real and knowable. Whereas by this time in the Indian tradition, you already have the Buddhists coming in, right? The Buddhists are already undermining the sense
Yeah,
of
they're
realism,
already in the game.
right? So roughly, in time frame, if you would think about this, like yes, the West did have epistemology at the point, but we just don't know. Like Socrates, I don't really recall a strong epistemological like development. But Aristotle, you definitely have that, right? And by the time you get to later, the hardcore skepticism in the West comes with like Hume, which is much, much later. But that skepticism mentality has been present in Indian context since the Buddhists, or maybe even before that. So it's interesting because they develop on two different lines, and we'll get into this more about how logic develops differently in the Western system and the Eastern system, or the Pramana system, because I think that's really interesting too. So Vinit, you back, man?
I am, but I don't know about the mic.
The mic sounds better now.
Okay.
Yeah, you could go on
Let's
video.
test it for like some seconds. Let's see.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So
It's not taking off.
No, we're good. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, perfect. Finally, thank God. It's all right, right?
Good.
Okay. Yeah. So where were we?
You were talking about Pramanas.
Yes. I was talking about how this our Pramana tradition and what you explained, the example that you gave. So we can immediately derive an inference that the Indian epistemologist or the Pramana theorists, for them, knowledge is basically identical with correspondence. It's something we would call it yatharth. So the reason why the cases of illusion are not considered valid knowledge or prama is because they do not correspond. You see a perception, you see some thing, right? It is in your experience, but it doesn't exist in reality itself. You have no ontological basis for the same. So one thing we can conclude from this immediately for our further discussion is that for knowledge, for Indian epistemologies, knowledge is correspondence. Basically, the whole is the correspondence theory of truth.
Even see if you can lift up the mic higher.
No, it won't work, I guess. I don't know what's wrong.
Yeah.
Now?
Yeah, I think you're actually not pulling from the mic. I think you're pulling from the computer. If you go down, if you go down here on the page in the StreamYard, hold on, the StreamYard, you see the mic symbol?
I think now it'll be clear, right? More clearly.
It sounds a little clear, but I think if you pull it closer.
It is?
Yeah, talk. Go ahead.
Okay, is it clearer now? Can you hear me?
I think it's just follow me real quick. On this page, where you see the mic symbol. Come back on video. Sorry, audience. Yeah, on the video, on the screen, you see the mic symbol, right? And you see the arrow pointing up, right next to it.
On the right next to the mic symbol, yeah, I see that.
Yeah, arrow pointing up, and you have things you can pick. You have to pick your mic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now it is better.
Now you're perfect.
Sure. Should we check? For
So
2
much
seconds?
better. So much better.
Oh
Yeah.
God. Okay. Thank you, Mukunda. Yeah, that's thoughts.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, listeners.
I mean, wait. Let me get a breather. Lord has been happening here. So, where should I start? I mean, you guys can continue and then I'll chime in. Where were you guys?
We were just talking about the difference between Western epistemology, at least at a high level, in terms of what the purpose of it is versus the Indian traditions?
What is the purpose? It is in Western philosophy and in Indian philosophy. I mean, as far as differences are concerned, I see a lot of similarities, especially if you take uh, just to check in again. It's fine, right?
It's better.
It's
Yeah.
better. Yeah. Uh, so the similarities you have in Western philosophy, the standard model of knowledge, the standard analysis of knowledge, which is justified through belief. So suppose Mukunda, you take a guess that tomorrow it will rain. At 8 o'clock in the morning, it will rain, and tomorrow it does rain. Are you going to say that you had knowledge, or can we attribute knowledge to you? Obviously, we can't, because it was a guess, because you didn't give me any justification. So Western epistemologists, they add this justification as well to it. So you have to have a belief, because without belief I can't attribute knowledge to you. The subject has to hold particular belief about something that is going to happen or something that is happening already. Uh, I think this solution like, again,
Sorry.
am I audible or this I'm getting some
There's still
noise?
there's some like background noise. It could be the case that again it's like the mic issue, but that's fine. We'll figure a solution shortly. But we'll continue forward. Okay, so do you have headphones? Yeah. Put it in the head.
I'm on the charging. Give me 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Uh, I'll
that was better. Yeah, do that.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
You're mute, Mukunda.
Yeah, I was saying, during this time period, we're going through these technical difficulties. What I would like to do is, hey, if you guys in the audience are listening, ask a question or throw in a comment. It'll be good. I know we're still trying to figure out our process here, so bear with us for the next this podcast, and I think we should be good on the next one. Very good on the next one. Okay, so when we're talking
Yeah, yeah.
about our systems here of thought, let me ask a question to you, King Kong. Why do you think it's important to even engage in pramanas at all? Like, at the end of the day, I look outside, I see things, I feel things, I touch things. Is that not enough for me to just say, okay, my senses are good, and I don't need to do all this mental gymnastics around about how I think or how I know? I mean, why does that matter?
I mean, it's a very, you have hit the target on its very head, right? I mean, why do we need that? And I think the most banal form of my answer would be, when you know that the world around me is there, the sun, the moon, the sky, the stars, the grass I touch, the phone I'm handling, basically the very apparent world, right? And the one that you have immediate experience, and I would also consider our mental faculties within that, right? I think when you accept that, you're already into the fact that you know something about reality, right? That there's something that's happening, right? Now what kind of knowledge is that? That's now when we pass things out, we are trying to trying to neat it out. Now, why do we need to do it? Well, because as we have seen again and again throughout our human history, and also studying about the non-human animal world, we do see that different sentient beings experience the world in different modes. And moreover, so there is certain kind of 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 let's say um, limitations to empirical or to our senses, because there are times where our senses do fail us, right? Hallucinations, looking at a mirage, or just the very apparent way the world is, right? We don't see atoms, we don't see the quarks, right? Or we don't experience, like, we know we are experiencing something, but there's no retrospective knowledge of our cognition of I-ness or the self, right? Now why do we need to pass these things out? Because it helps us now understand that there's certain kind of sure ability about reality, if not on the whole, then at least there are certain sure things that we can know. And by knowing that, we can, like, try to clean out the dirt and look at reality more closely in a more better way. Now, for that, I think, so, I was talking about pratyaksha, how when I started. There's also certain kind of knowledge which, I would say is intuitive knowledge, right? Like the anubhuti of, or the feeling of, or the direct cognition of the self as I am existing, or the outside world exist, or for the sake, there's numbers, there's geometric shapes, right? There are these categories of existence and non-existence. So in the Western world, this would be called as rational, or rather a priori thoughts that are like structured in your mind, and then it's kind of a web or a network that you throw onto the world, right?
Right.
So yeah, that would be my so it's more of like, it's like this grid pattern where it's like this web where these pramanas come together to kind of like shine the light on different segments of reality, and certain pramanas are complemented or sharpened by others in other domains, right? Because I believe within our worldview, different domains or different scopes of reality bleed into each other, and hence the pramanas also overlap, right? So yeah, that's what I think. I mean, yeah, I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there is a practical element that I'm asking about, right? Which is really like, I think why people engage in trying to ascertain whether or not how do we know what we know is real, is because of these fringe cases. For example, like, you and I, you might taste chocolate, I might taste chocolate, and then you have a different taste of chocolate than I do. Like, your expression of that is, you have chocolate, you're like, oh, that's sour, and I'm like, oh, that's really, really sweet. Now we're both eating the same thing. Why is it we have a different experience, and whose experience is more quote unquote real, right? That's part of, I think, the disengagement about the world, right? Like, how do we understand a world that we think is objective, right? So first, I think it's because otherwise it's like the metaphysical questions is, then the question is like, oh, is this cup really exist, right? Does this cup really exist? Like, how do I know this exists? And then you talk about this, and then, but someone might come up and say, well, I don't see that color red, so maybe that red color is not there, and it's in your mind. So then it undermines our direct perception, right? We think, oh, then maybe what I'm seeing is just what I'm seeing, and it's not real for everyone else. So how do I know that we are all partaking in the same world, and we're in that partaking of the same world? Are we actually also being able to justify why that knowledge is real? Why is my experience of this cup or this thing better than yours or stronger than yours? And that engagement is what's going to, like, make the world kind of knowable for us, and I in some sense manipulable, right? Like, if you think about this, right, we if if we're skeptical of our perceptions, and I'm just using perception right now, pratyaksha, by the way, for everyone that's listening, pratyaksha just means perception, and it could be sense perception, like through the eyes, touch, smell, all that stuff, but usually in the Indian context, Pratyaksha is really referring to like seeing things. So in that context of us seeing something, is it our experience of that thing real? Is that object real? And how is it I'm knowing I know? Because this second question is interesting because the Indian tradition uniquely, actually, I think it is uniquely Indian in this context, the Pramanas, they also deal with things like dreams, right? Like going into, you have an experience
Yeah,
in a dream, you observe things in a dream. Is that dream experience real, right? Like, or even the knowledge that I know, like, there's two levels here. There's that expression of myself in a dream. Like when I'm in the dream, like I feel like I'm in the dream, I'm doing all the things. But then when I get out of the dream, I know I had a dream, right? So those are two different experiences of from different perspectives of phenomena. So I think the purpose practically is to figure out this world in that sense. Now intellectually, it's I guess the difference is to be able to think, not just experience the world, but to think about how we think about things or how we know things, not for practical purposes, right? For you and I, for most people, this idea of pramana or epistemology is about practical ways, right? I'll give you another example in my life as when I was a trial lawyer, right? So let's say you saw a murder and you you know you saw the murderer, but the lighting was bad or whatever it was, and like three other people saw that the same thing from different perspectives. When I put you on the stand, you point to one person, someone else points to someone else, and the third person points to, let's say, the second person. um, how do you know which of these is more true or honest or like a real belief or a real experience than the other? So you consider things like lighting, memory, uh even things like, oh, how well do you recognize races? How well can you how well is your eyesight? What was the conditions of, was it foggy, was it clear, was it how far were you? All these factors play a role to figure out, did this thing happen? Because sometimes people do hallucinate, right? Sometimes your memory will go back and fill in the details. So the questions always arise, at least practically. That's a practical thing. Now, elements of epistemology do play there, right? The rules of evidence in a court of law are akin to rules of epistemology for the purposes of legal and practical stuff. Now, for a philosopher, the engagement is a bit beyond that, right? Because they're not just trying to figure out what happened here. They're trying to understand, what is all this universe, this existence, and how do we know all this is real or not real or imaginary, fake? And the way we kind of do that is through first ascertaining what is it we know and how can we know, and is one means of knowing more valid than the other? Is reasoning better than logic, or is logic better than reasoning? Like for example, when we talk about let's say, physics, right? And I'll just use this general example. This cloth, I know, I touch this, it feels solid, it feels real, I can move it, function, do all this stuff with it. But physics, based upon logic and um, other principles that are beyond our tactile sensations and our perception, tells us that this cloth is mostly empty, right? There's more space between these atoms that create this and this actual thing is. So these sensations, even though it looks like a solid, feels like a solid, and water can pass through it, but like my fist doesn't go through it, right? It moves around my fist. This thing is solid, and it's porous, and it's tactile to me, but physics tells me it's not. So which is more true in that sense, right? So now so the purpose for a philosopher or a like not a physician, but is a physics person, a physicist, sorry, physicist, is to determine which of these views are correct, or are they correct in one area and not correct in another area. So I think there's different purposes for our engagement in epistemology and pramanas. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Vinit is here. So, Vinit, are you there with us?
I am. I'm trying to see if I can.
Your voice sounds better.
Does it sound better?
It does. But yeah, just why don't you come on and we'll just go with it. We'll figure it out. So let's just.
Yeah, it's much more clearer. Yeah.
All right.
Are you guys sure this time? Like
For right now, it is. So we'll
now it is. I think there was probably what you told me to do, Mukunda.
Yeah.
So I have switched it to the microphone. Previously, it was the MacBook.
Yeah. So now it sounds way better. Way better. Okay. Yeah.
Way better. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no background noise. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry to the viewers and to you as well.
No problem. By the way, are you live streaming this on your channel too?
On my channel?
Yeah.
I had started, but I don't know. I thought maybe it's the issue is because of it. So I
No. So that's not the issue. You're good.
No,
Go ahead.
so I should start it again, right?
Yeah.
Now it is good. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great.
Okay. Perfect. God, Narayana. This is. Let's start, guys. Please continue. I'll be streaming it on my channel as well.
So you just press this. You just press that button and you're fine. It streams automatically. You don't have to go to your channel.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So I don't know if you caught anything we just talked about, but you probably didn't. You're probably working on trying to.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
So go ahead.
Catch up.
I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Just in a second. There you go. This. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, good.
All right. So, could you give me, a quick brief? Where are we in the discussion?
So I was just discussing with KingKong why it's important to, why doing any sort of pramana or epistemology is important. One level is for practical purposes of everyday life. Second level is for the intellectual engagement to figure out what is out there, what is real, how do we know it, right? So I went through a bunch of, I think some might be good examples, others might be stupid examples, but yeah, why do you think epistemology or the Pramana methodology is important?
So I was reading B.K. Matilal's essays on perception, Nyaya perception. Something that he said, it caught my eyes. He mentioned that for Indian philosophers, like Pramana is the king of philosophy. Let's put it that way. Epistemology is where everything starts. You cannot think about metaphysics if first you're not assured about the means of knowledge or the instruments of knowledge you're using, right? So you have to start from epistemology. If I'm thinking about ontology, what exists out there, and I'm using a faulty means of knowledge, a means of knowledge that's outdated or not properly analyzed, then 100% I'm going to reach a false conclusion or reach an invalid or a untrue conclusion about the reality. So that's why I feel epistemology is important in my personal philosophical journey as well. I realized it after reading some of these epistemologists, and very interesting that it wasn't the Pramana tradition per se, but the Buddhists, Dignaga. So when I read Dignaga, I was taken aback that how much of my time was wasted, to use the word, in metaphysics because it was not grounded in epistemology. So I was thinking about time, I was thinking about space. Me and KingKong used to debate, discuss. And then one day a thought came in my mind, hold on. I mean, sure, I'm thinking about these things, what exists in the heavens, what exists in the nether worlds, but what is the means of knowledge by which I'm thinking about these things? Have I thought about how much have I vindicated the means of knowledge themselves? And that kind of made me or forced me or propelled me to start reading about Indian epistemology. So yeah, it is important, very important. That's where philosophy should start. You're muted, Mukunda.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's interesting because I think a lot of Western thinkers that think that epistemology is a second order function, right? First is to figure out ontology, and then you could go into epistemology. No, first determine what's real, and then you can see how do you know that, right? As opposed to
Yeah.
Indian thought is saying, well, the first thing I know is knowing. So let's figure out knowing, and then I can figure out what is to be known, right? So it's kind of a bit different, right? Like a lot of times, like because there's an element we'll get to later about the nature of shabda, right, or scripture or testimony. Better said testimony than I say scripture, because it can apply across the board to any reliable testimony. But we'll get to that. Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we first start with? I know you have a few slides, Vinit. Do you want to jump on and start with your slide?
Yeah, we can. Yes, I think it would be better if we, first introduce or segregate the schools, the Indian schools, into two camps.
Sure.
So that'll give us a broad picture.
Yeah, go for it.
We can pull that slide out.
All right, let me see.
Can you do that,
I-
Mukunda, or
Yeah,
should I share the screen?
If you have it readily available, you can go ahead and share. I have to
Yes.
find it.
Try to share it myself.
If not, I can do it too. You got it, or do you want me to do it real quick? I got it. I can do it.
I guess you can do it.
Okay, fine. Perfect. All right. Sorry, everybody. We are a bit of a mess, but that's okay. It'll all be good. All right, here we go. So let's share.
Yeah, this will not happen again. I take this on me, guys.
No, it's okay. Don't worry about it. All right. So we have
Okay,
this.
man, it's all cool. It does happen. It can happen. There's no need
There
to
we
stress
go.
about it.
Nah, man. Should have been more smoother. My bad.
It's all good.
All right. So this
Right.
is it. You have the idealist camp and the realist camp. This gives us, it simplifies everything a lot. So one side you have the Pramana tradition or the Pramana theorists, the realists basically, those who believe that knowledge is possible, we can attain knowledge, and they are not skeptical, they are anti-skeptical, and they believe that truth is attainable. There's something called objective truth, and that the world exists, the world is real. Contrary to these guys, you have adjacent to them a competing camp, which is the idealist skeptic camp. In this camp, you have obviously the infamous Shunyavadins, and also for some of you, it might be, might sound shocking, like how can you say that the Advaitins are anti-Pramana, but they are in a way anti-Pramana, or they are in a way anti-epistemology if you look at it from a more vantage point of view. So that's why I placed Buddha, Nagarjuna, Shankara, Sri Harsha, the entire Advaitin tradition in the idealist skeptic camp. They doubt what is Pramana. They argue that no definition of Pramanas are possible, and they're doubtful of all definitions. They basically want to maintain that epistemology or concepts or definitions, they are good as far as they can take you, help you in navigating the Vyavhara, the Vyavharika realm. But beyond that, they cannot lead you to truth. So, yeah, this is helpful a lot. What do you think, guys?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think this is great because we could start a relative conversation around this, right? So because each side does have strengths here, right? When you look at the idealist camp, right, they're really arguing that the things we call things are merely convention, right? This, for example, like this phone, it doesn't really exist as a phone. We call it a phone. It's a name. These things are just composites. It's not a real thing. It's so although we say it's real for the purposes of our engagement, but it's not ultimately real. It's simply a term of convention, right? So the one of their arguments around this is like, so if that's the case, that things we call particular things in this world are merely name and form, but not really don't have real substance to them, right? At the end of the day, that's imputing the fact that, or it doesn't impute, sorry, it's the wrong word, but it's underlying, what underlies that position is that even the way we know things, right, whether we perceive something or nothing, it's merely a superficial kind of knowledge. It's not real knowledge because it's of particulars that doesn't really exist. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's you have placed it beautifully. So a distinction, if we can make a quick distinction between appearance and existence, what these guys are trying to say, they're saying that all the time that you think an object exists, you're mistaken, because you are dealing with appearances. I have a mic in my hand, right? But this, when it is filtered out and when it reaches my consciousness, all that it is an appearance. I do not really get to experience the mic in itself. I do not really get to experience the laptop in front of me. I do not really get to experience the world that exists in itself. And this is quite in line with the scientific view as well. So the scientists, they generally take indirect realism, which says you experience the representation or the copies of the copies, maybe. But you for sure, you do not experience the object directly. Either it is the copy of the object or the copy of the copy. In all senses, you are experiencing an appearance. So there's a barricade between you and the real world, and
Right.
that is the world of appearance. So if that is the case, then they are trying to push back the Pramana theorists that how can you claim that you know anything for sure? How can you claim that you know the reality in itself, how it is? And you see the charge is being led by the Buddhists pre Shankara's arrival. So you had the idealist, the subjective idealist, which is the school of Vasubandhu, the school of Dharmakirti, Big Naga, and before him, the great Nagarjuna himself. It is, doubtful whether Buddha himself ever had these opinions on epistemology, but nevertheless, the schools that came after him, the schools that succeeded him, does seem to have come up with these ideas. So yeah, I mean, and to correlate this with West, in West you see this phenomena in the very cradle of Western philosophy. It ties back to Plato. It goes back to Plato, Aristotle. Plato was the first one to doubt, do we really experience the world? And he eventually denounced the entire sensory experience as illusion. Or
Well, Heraclitus, right? Heraclitus before him, kind of.
Yes, before him, Heraclitus as well. So
yeah, but I think the difference is they're making ontological claims, not so much doing epistemology of trying to understand how they know what they know in this context. Aristotle, I think, is the first one that really engages with that. But I mean, going back to this point about the idealist camp, and I want to hammer this a bit more, because I think what's interesting about the idealist camp is what they're ultimately saying is there's a world out there and there's a world in here. When I point to it here, I mean the mental world. What they're saying is you're not experiencing anything out there. You're only experiencing mental things. Ultimately, you're experiencing, like, what you think is a tree is not actually the tree. It's your representation in your mind that you're experiencing, right? It's not whether or not it's out there. You don't know. You just don't know. All you know is the representation, and for the purposes of conventionally living and working and engaging in the world, you can think it's real, but ultimately that's not real. It's a representation in your head. So you're not ever experiencing a thing as a thing or in and of itself. You're always experiencing it in the context of your own mental impressions, which includes concepts you put into it, feelings, attachments, all that other stuff that goes with it. Is that right? Would you say that's correct?
that's right. But let me play a devil's advocate. I would like
Yeah.
to champion the other side of the view as well. So
Yeah.
the realist might retort, or they would retort that uh, there's a quote from Bertrand Russell. He says, "Science wants to establish truth, but by demarcating itself from what exists in itself and how it appears, it kind of is clipping its own wings. If you see it, because on one side you want to know what truth is, but then you have this view where you're never in direct contact with it. You're always dealing with representations. So they're in a bind. Like, do they want to know the truth? Of course, they want to know the truth, but then they also have this commitment to indirect realism, which kind of makes the entire thing futile, like the entire endeavor futile, because you're never going to get out of this curtain of representation of appearances. On the other hand, the Pramana guys, they're saying, why do we need to demarcate? Why do we need to bring this distinction? What if we turn the table around and what if we ask the idealist, do you have any evidence for the distinction? Or is it just an assumption? So this is what Nyayikas, the Mimamsakas, they do in their debates, Udayanacharya and others. They flip the entire thing on its head and they ask the idealist, can you prove that this distinction is fundamental? Can you prove that you're not experiencing the world directly? And at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is leave them in a state of stalemate where the idealist comes to realization that if the other side is if they are under a blind spot regarding reality, then they too are you know they too are experiencing the same conundrum. Because if they can't establish the distinction in and of itself, then it's just an assumption. And the realist then can stack up another argument and he can say, well, since this is withhold, right, the conclusion where there is a distinction between reality and appearance, so long as you're not able to establish this, we can go with common sense. Let's go with common sense. Let's go with how people relate to each other, how people describe the world. Let's take language as the framework that gives us reality. And in language, you see, when I use the word microphone, I am not using it for appearance. I'm using it for a concrete object. When I say the laptop, when I try to talk to another person, I'm doing it with the knowledge that this guy is not just another appearance. I'm not in a dream. So this is what the realists are trying to say. They're basically challenging the idealist predilection for this appearance and reality distinction. They're like, why do you want to distinguish? Because you're bringing something on top of the common sense knowledge, the default state. The onus or the burden is on you, not on us. Because we are assured this is the default state, that the world exists, we are in direct contact with reality. Now, if anyone challenges the default state, they share a greater burden than us.
Yeah, so I'm going to push back on that from the idealist position, which is to say, well, no, the default state is that you're experiencing something. Whether it's real or not is not the default state. You're just assuming it's real. Like you have an experience of the tree, but that again, that experience of the tree is not a direct experience. You know, it's an experience mediated through like your vision, your mind, your mental concepts. You're never directly experiencing the tree. You're always experiencing it through some sort of mediation. So to say that the tree is there or the tree is real, you're making assumptions. This could all be in your mind, and your mind is putting together these concepts. And what's real, quote unquote, the real thing you're talking about is just the experience, not actually the thing in of itself. So you can't tell me there's no real world out there. All you could tell me is that you have an experience, and it seems at some level to correspond to what might or may not be out there.
Yeah, so I think this is where it all boils down to. They are each one arguing for their own case, calling the other one, the one that is riding on assumptions or relying on assumptions. And this is what I said. That's what, as a philosophical system, you would want to do. You want to bring the other party into a stalemate.
Yeah, but so what's interesting about this too is, at some level, Shankara does this, and I think a few other people do this. Is they go take it back to the one thing you can't actually fundamentally deny is that the experience itself. If the experience itself is real, right? In the sense of I know, I exist. Though some sense of Descartes, I think, therefore I am, idea is that at some level, even for an idealist, you have to accept that your experience is real at some level. Or there's something experiencing, and if there's something experiencing in that moment, even if it's ultimately unreal, there's that real experience of something happening that you have to build everything on. So I think the idea would be is you start with the basic, most fundamental core, which is what is it the thing that absolutely that you know directly, right? And you build from there.
Can you build it from there? That's the whole thing that I guess realists want to ask. So I'll, personally with me, Mukunda, I was, King Kong knows this, 4 months back, 5 months back, or a year back, I was a convinced phenomenologist or a convinced idealist, in a sense that I had also become a skeptic. I was sure that you can never go beyond this, the this curtain of Maya or appearance, and you can never would be able to say that yes, I am in contact with reality. But then in West, you have this argument from J.E. Moore. Moore is trying to argue. You might have heard this catchphrase which says, "Every philosopher's modus ponens is another's modus tollens." Meaning, if you are saying that because we cannot know reality directly, therefore we're dealing with appearances. Moore tries to flip it on its head. He says, we can or we are dealing with the reality, therefore it is not an appearance. This is exactly what he does against Descartes' argument that we could be dreaming. He says, we know we are not dreaming, therefore the possibility of dream is refuted. Now, you might want to say that, how do you know if you're not dreaming? It's an assumption, as you said. But then this is exactly what the realist is saying. I can, or the realist can retort exactly the same thing to you. How do you know? How do you know this is not reality in itself? You're not in touch with what exists or as a concrete thing in itself. Because as long as you're not able to prove the case, I am not able to prove the case. The safe side is to go with common sense. The safe side is to go with the default state. And then in my own personal journey, I was able to see, wait, hold on. Can we put the skeptic in the court? Can we, get hold of him and ask him, dude, you've been asking us to prove. Can you prove that your skepticism is well-founded? Can you prove that there's enough evidence for us to doubt that we are not in contact with reality apart from possibilities? Because if it is possible that this could be a dream, that this could be an illusion, it is equally possible that this might not be an illusion, that this might not be a dream to begin with. So both the possibilities are there. Where is the symmetry breaker? Who is going to bring the symmetry breaker? And as long as there's no explicit symmetry breaker, why not go with the default state? In West, you have this view in contemporary philosophy championed by Michael Humer. So he calls it phenomenological conservatism. He says, as long as these guys, the skeptics or the idealists, are not able to substantiate their distinction, you should not give up on your common sense. So, as a safe side, that's what basically they're trying to say.
Sure. So, King Kong, I know you haven't spoken anything in a while. Do you have any responses, any thoughts on this so far?
So I want to keep it brief. Now, as Vinit said regarding the pushback from the realist side to the idealist side, regarding if there's no symmetry breaker, if there's no right justification more so for one side to be heavier than the other, then why not we adhere to the most common sense view that this is the objective world is real and it's out there, right? It's not in the realm of our mind. Now, from the idealist side, Mukunda, I don't know whether this would take the conversation in a different track. So when the idealists say that, or the idealist skeptic would say that the experience of the tree or the world out there is in my mind, right?
even if I grant the fact, right, and then I would probably concede that, let's say, the world is not a dream in the sense that the world is not of the conscious experience of a dream, abrupt, but not having a certain pattern and all. That there's certain kind of intuitive taste of it, rather than the waking experience. But nonetheless, the idealist can say that even the waking experience, even if there's a certain symmetry or there's a certain pattern to it, is nonetheless a product of your first person experience. Now, my question to them would be, and again, I'm asking this question not in the sense of critique, but rather trying to, like, in a more Socratic way, to see or to peer more deeper into the underlying reasonings of their view. So my question to them would be, even if I assume that the experience of the exterior world is in your mind, and it's made somehow of the same stuff as consciousness, isn't there a certain extension, a certain difference, so to speak, between your experience and you? So isn't there a certain kind of the object and the subject now? Doesn't that bring in certain kind of outsideness, in a sense that it's not you, there's a certain difference? So I think that's where it gets much more deeper. And secondly, regarding I don't know whether, like, what degrees of skepticism we are dealing with, but I think there's a certain intuitive push, so to speak, to accept the fact that I don't know, or the fact that I had this experience, now whatever content it is of, whether it's existing or not, wouldn't that mean that there's some kind of knowledge?
Well,
right?
So I think there's a couple things going on here, right? So I want to put aside the extreme type of idealism, the solipsism type of mentality, which says the only thing that exists is my mind. I don't know if anything else exists. But let's put that extreme level of skepticism aside for a sec, right? I mean, most idealism in this context isn't. So what they're not claiming. So I want to be clear, is they're not claiming there's no world out there. They're not claiming that. They're just claiming you don't know it directly. That whatever is out there might be out there. You just can't know it because it's all mentally mediated. So it is. So it's not to say it's all in the mind alone. No, the experience of the thing, the knowledge of the thing is in the mind. You're not directly experiencing the thing itself. Is ultimately what they're saying. There could be the thing itself. Those other beings could exist. All these things could exist. And in fact, they probably do, but they're just not directly known. Where the realist is saying, at the end of the day, well, they all exist. If they all exist and I exist, and then I'm experiencing them, that's real. That exists. That's true. Whether or not you want to say it's totally true, completely true, partially true, it doesn't matter. It's real. We're experiencing the thing directly at some level, right? Like, so I think the idea, in some sense, is turning around what we would call real or not, or existing outside of us or not. Like, the realist camp, in some sense, is saying that all that out there is real. We exist. We know it directly, and there's a relationship between all these things. The idealist camp fundamentally saying we don't know. It could be it's real out there. Let's just assume it is, but we don't know that. There's no way for us to know that because it's all mentally created. All this stuff is mind stuff, at least when it comes to our experience of that thing. Would that be fair, or did I miss the mark here?
Yeah, that's fair. Now I don't know if Vinit wants to take the topic forward. Vinit, if you want to more
Go on with
present the
your comment.
arguments for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, you can go on with your comment, and then let's see if we could go to the next slide.
Oh no, I think what I said would be it would suffice for the time being. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yes.
Yes,
just
yes, go
just before we end, I just want, at least on this particular slide, is there anything that you think we didn't cover here on this particular slide that we should? Because I felt like we kind of touched on it. I mean, so I think in this sense, so again, the idealist skeptic camp and this is particularly in regards to perception. We have to remember this. It's not necessarily in regards to reason, logic,
Ontology.
or a or even scripture. So yeah, I mean, because I think most schools, it's funny, I would say this is, reason is not as much doubted as perception is. So I think there's something interesting to say about that, because even in the Western tradition, right, you have like, the two major pre-Socratics like Parmenides and Heraclitus approach the world differently, right? Like, for example, Parmenides, even though he doesn't, because we only have fragments, even though he doesn't talk about epistemology in a deep way like the Indian tradition does or other people do. What we do find is this idea of doxa versus what's the word? Oh my god. Anyways, the reality in doxa, right? The doxa means belief, or this idea of it's or a position, right? Let's say, so doxa in this context, he would say is, well, all we can know is at some level that there's only one. And he, by the way, it's interesting that he gets this through the tradition of having a revelation from a goddess, right? A goddess comes down and presents to Parmenides that this reality, this truth of the one. Now, his argument is like, everything that we perceive, this fluctuation is merely appearance again, and that ultimately there's only one, which you can get through, and reason alone can get you there. Where Heraclitus, on the flip side, is saying that, sense data is not reliable, and we see fluctuation everywhere, so all is flux, right? So these two have two different perspectives on what they're saying. Both of them are agreeing at some level sense data is not reliable. Parmenides does bring into account that he gets this knowledge of the one through the goddess, and that reason also gets you there, right? And I think in some sense, like, Socrates and Plato kind of are grappling with both these ideas. And the idea of the theory of forms comes from the fact that it's much more similar to a Parmenidean view, that there's some sort of world out there that is of a perfect, like, homogeneous kind of reality, the world of forms versus the world of so it's not the world of forms, it's the world of the ideals, right? Ideas and forms, where we're in the world of forms, and then the world of ideas is like this perfect world. So I think in this sense they are also similarly talking about this, but they just don't do it in the way the Indian tradition does, which is really spend a lot of time engaging on these pramanas, these systems of thought. So both, Aristotle accepts that you can have, Plato accepts you can have some sense data, which can be reliable, cannot be reliable. We could get into, you have to determine that. And then, but he puts primacy of reason, which he takes that from Parmenides, more so than Heraclitus. And I think also, like, Aristotle later on in his, and we talked about this, he does push the realism. For him, it's like the world is real. And we can know it in some real sense. So he takes a different position from Socrates and Aristotle and the pre-Socratics. But also reason for him is important, because he does talk about the priors, right? So in some sense, like, epistemology kind of becomes second order function for him. And then I think that eventually it's like the skeptics that really take off Big time. But I also think, by the way, I think this skepticism, they borrow deeply from Indian tradition, maybe meeting with the Bodhas or the Jainas, and building that out. So I just wanted to give like this super rough and dirty and messy kind of pre-modern times, like the Greek thought around idealism and realism and how they developed it. You have anything to add to that, guys?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you summed up pretty well. They are not, I mean, I agree, they're not as obsessed as we are. Probably most of their epistemology is being implicitly committed to. So when Plato is talking about what exists out there, whether they are ideas or whether this world is real in itself, perhaps instead of the characteristic way of the Indian philosophers, whether they first cash out the epistemological concepts, they straight away jump into ontology and metaphysics, allowing the entire epistemology to work in the background. Yeah, I mean, this is something we can clearly tease out by seeing how, analyzing their methodology, be it Plato, be it Aristotle, even the pre-Socratics. They start by thinking, what is the world made out of? So that's ontological analysis. That's not a epistemological analysis. However, if they would have been Indian philosophers, their first line of thought would have been, how do we know? Right? What is knowledge? So yeah, definitely, yeah, we agree there. In fact, in West, you don't see that like the focus on epistemology shifting until Descartes comes into the picture. I think he's the first one to hammer it, and the first one to bring this to the fore that, guys, we need to question this scholastic tradition. We need to question Plato. We need to question Aristotle, because their way of reasoning about reality is not rigorous, is not mathematical enough. So he's the one to first break away from this entire 1,000-year-old tradition of the tradition that was obsessed with metaphysics and ontology, and brings the focus back to epistemology. And then you see Descartes, and then you see Leibniz, Spinoza. Since then on, I feel the stamp of epistemology has already has only become denser more and more as we have moved forward in the chronology. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. So that's a good point. And I think we have a bunch of more slides that we want to go through and discuss. Because yeah, I think on the broad strokes, you're right. Like the actual development of epistemology as its own unique, separate category of philosophical inquiry was pretty late in European or Western
Yes.
ideas, and then it got really robust, frankly, from like
Yeah.
the 16th 17th century till modern time. They got very robust, and I think that's worth I don't know, we could put a pin in that for a second. So I think we could jump on to your next slide, which I think is actually talking about the Indian system itself, right? The Pramanas themselves. So we can do that. So let me take this down. While I'm doing that, King Kong, any thoughts, man?
Kong, are you there?
Oh, he might not. Oh, there he is. Go ahead, Kong.
Yeah, hello. Sorry, there was network issue. Yeah, I think we should move on to the next slides, and we can discuss more on how the modes of different pramanas are, different means of knowledge are, and how they correlate, and why different sampradayas reject what they reject, and how they justify what they accept. Right. So Vinit can explain that.
Yeah. So here's the slide. In the beginning, we briefly discussed this, which is the pramana, the means of knowing, prameya, object knowledge, prama, and then there's also the first one, which is the what's it called? The pramata, right? The pramata, which I think is kind of implicit here in this document, but yeah. So the pramata is the one who knows, means knowledge, object knowledge, and what's true cognition. Yeah, you want to talk a bit about this, Vinit?
Yeah, this is the classical Pramana view. More or less among the realist schools, be it the Mimamsakas, the Sankhyans, even Adi Shankara or the Advaitins as well, whom we had placed in the idealist camp when we were discussing or trying to simplify Indian approaches to epistemology. Even he, when he is in his Vyavaharika realm in the transactional world, he accepts all these pramanas. So nobody doubts them until you ask them their ultimate view on epistemology, then the segregation starts. If they have to carry on their day-to-day activities and get indulged in the transactional world, then they accept all of them except the pramanas. So you have pramana, which is the means of knowledge, the prameya, the object of knowledge, and prama, the valid knowledge. You cannot have the latter without the former. The prameya and prama, they fall with the falling of this pramana. So you need the means of knowledge to establish an object of knowledge and then decide whether the knowledge produced was valid or invalid. And there are the realists, they debate among themselves. The Mimamsakas debate against the Nyayikas. The later Dvaitins or the dualists, they debate against the Nyayikas, but nobody has a beef with the Nyayikas on this particular categorization or classification. Mukunda mentioned something, you mentioned something really interesting. You said that nobody has doubted a reason per se. Perhaps they have. So we could say that when the skeptics or the idealists were attacking the Pramana folks, the Pramana bros, they were also attacking inference, because one of the Pramanas, as it is mentioned there in the slide, is Anuman. So Anuman is something you do with, although it is based on perception, but it is more than perception, it goes beyond perception. So you see certain samples, you see, you experience certain facts, and if you have been experiencing that fact all over again and again, you draw a universal principle out of it. That's the process of induction. So that's pretty much what Anumana stands for in Indian philosophy. You experience particular facts, like let's say you experience that whenever there is a smoke, in all your experiences, in all your data samples, the smoke was accompanied by the fire. So you have enough data set to then make an inference that they are intrinsically connected to each other. There's a vyapti. Vyapti is basically the relation of universal concomitance, which is basically pervasion. So one thing goes with another thing universally. If there's a smoke, then the fire would eventually be there. So this is basically the rough sketch of how induction works in Indian philosophy. And these are the stock, one of the stock example, the smoke fire example, and there are other examples as well. So
Yeah.
Pratyaksha, yeah, go on.
Just on that point, it's so this is where I think you'll find a difference between. Again, I'm being general. There are different types of syllogisms, right? There are the 3 steps to syllogism: major premise, minor premise, and the conclusion. The Indian one is interesting because it's either a 5 or a 7 step, and it can be. There's a major premise, example of major premise, minor premise, example of that, and then there's a conclusion, or or they'll do that and they'll add the counter example. Like, for example, like what they'll say is, where there is smoke, there is fire, like on the hill over there, unlike in the water. And then or in like in the kitchen, and then they'll say, I see smoke, there is fire. So they'll make that kind of argument, right? Because what they'll say is that you might see smoke on a hill, and then usually when there's smoke on a hill, there's fire. You look in the kitchen, you see smoke, there is fire. And then, but you might see fire in the water, but there's no smoke, right? So they'll use that as a counterexample, and so those kinds of syllogisms, a 5 or a 7 step syllogism, it would be different than the Western for a couple of reasons. I think one is Anumana here as inference is it's not deductive. Right? It's not deductive reasoning.
It's not deductive.
Yeah, it's induction, right? So you like, for example, like you would say something like, you might start with most crows are black. Uh, I see a crow, therefore it's black, would be an inductive kind of reasoning. Because most crows are black, I see a crow, it's probably black. Now they'll respond back by adding, well, there's also white crows, so there'll be a little difference in induction versus deduction, right? Because deduction just means it has to logically follow, while induction is going to give you the probability of it following.
Yeah, something very quick. So this is where it gets interesting. When you compare this with the Western tradition, in West you have something called as a priori knowledge, right? A priori knowledge. That's a tongue twister for me always. So you have a priori knowledge, which is basically a proposition derived without harking back to anything that is there in experience. So if I say if I say Devdatta is unmarried, you could immediately conclude he's a bachelor. This kind of reasoning, which stems from definition, concludes directly from definition, is non-experiential, right? It is a priori. In Indian philosophy, something really interesting that they did not made it explicit. You do not see a category called as a priori. Obviously, it's an English word, but you do not see it in the corresponding Sanskrit terminology as well. Because for them, inference, as you said, is induction. Merely deducing from definitions was not something that Indian philosophers were very fond of. They would rather let it work in the background, but never in the foreground of this entire epistemological enterprise. So
Well, I will say this, because you find in the tradition talking about the son of a barren woman, right? So they are at some level engaging in, I wouldn't say a priori in exactly the same way the West does, but definitional context, right? Saying, well, you can't logically have a son of a barren woman, because the term barren woman means one who can't give birth, who doesn't. So definitionally, that makes no sense. But I don't
of course,
think yeah.
I mean, of course they are, but as I said, they do not make it explicit like it is
Correct.
in the West.
Yeah.
In the West, it is like a category in itself, something that anyone who takes a course in epistemology, he is first introduced to this distinction between a priori and a posteriori, right? Or analytical or synthetic, something that is based off definition, something that is based not of definition. You don't see this explicit classification in any, let's say, primer book of epistemology from even the traditional acharyas. They do not differentiate it like that. It's for them it is implicit. A priori is implicit. They do not take it as the true spirit of inference. The true spirit of inference for them is induction. You have to start from samples that you gather from experience and then draw a conclusion. This is the reason why perhaps I think when you look at the argument for God's existence, you don't see those kind of arguments which you see in the West that are purely based off definitions, like the ontological argument given by Anson or Descartes, where they try to derive God's existence through the definition of existence itself. You don't see that in India, right? Because the best example that was given by Udayana, it starts with the premise that because we have seen things that are made up of parts being created, therefore we can make an inductive reasoning that the universe, which is made up of parts, must have a creator as well. But look at the cornerstone of this kind of reasoning. It is inference. It is not. It is induction. It is not deduction. So yeah, that's a very interesting point to make. However, B.K. Matilal has tried to challenge this view. So he had, if my memory serves right, he had an essay on logic which he wrote, which was published in 1982. So in that he challenged this. He eventually agreed that yes, the a priori is implicit, but if we go in depth, we can glean out. We can show you that Indian philosophers were accustomed to it. They were aware of it, and they were also aware of modal operators like necessity, possibility, and all these kind of stuff, all these kind of concepts as well, which kind of propelled me to reconsider my view as well, because for most of my time in indulging with Indian philosophy, I used to think, yeah, these guys were confusing uh, induction with the only kind of inference. But when I read B.K. Matilal, I was enlightened that no, wait, Nagarjuna was giving arguments against the Pramana folks using definitions, which cannot be done if you do not accept a priori knowledge. So it was there, but it was in a implicit way, not explicit, as it is in the West.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I think that's because the focus was not purely on. I think all of them viewed logic or reasoning as a tool, not the tool, right? So,
Yeah.
in that sense, they were really, really focused on pratyaksha, right? Because most of the conversation,
Yes,
most of
absolutely.
the conversations are on two things: pratyaksha and shabda, right?
You know,
Whether,
yeah.
go ahead.
Very, very quickly, Shankara. So Shankara denounces the world. He says it is mithya, it is maya. Now, this is something really interesting and perplexing as well. Why would someone like him say this? He says this in Gita Bhashya, I think 17th chapter or 18th chapter. King Kong can correct me on this if he has got the numbers right. He says, even if thousand of Shrutis, thousand of Vedas say that fire is cold or icy, right? You don't believe that. You go with Prataksha. Now, this is very interesting. This is someone whose entire philosophy is based on the view that Prataksha, the knowledge of reality that you get from perception, is not reliable. Do not trust it. But then, even he cannot save himself from this conventional, traditional way of seeing the gradation or hierarchy of pramanas, where you have to stack all other pramanas upon perception. Very interesting.
Yeah, I would. So I will make a slight detour in saying this, right? I think people think of pramanas as hierarchy. I don't. I think pramanas as spheres of authority. So yes, they are hierarchy within spheres of authority. Like again, so if you look at pratyaksha is the highest authority when it comes to things of this world, like the things you can experience. Pratyaksha overrides everything. It overrides reason, overrides scripture. But like for example, things you can't experience or know directly, like nature of God or dharma, whatever, then scripture has highest authority. Pratyaksha would be secondary or tertiary. Reason sits always in the middle, right? Because reason allows one to differentiate the types of pratyaksha or types of perception and the types of scripture, right? Reason sits as a mediating factor between these things based upon their areas of power. But going to this, your examples here, right? So let's just do the four pramanas. So this is Nyaya, right? Nyaya has four. Shankara accepts six. The Mimamsakas accept five. And then you have Ramanuja accepts three. Madhva accepts three, I think, too.
Three. I think Nyaya also accepts six as well, but they kind of incorporate the other two within
right.
in Anumana.
Yeah, a lot of those schools do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
They incorporate Anumana. So the six idea is just these are separate things. Whereas when you do the four, you kind of probably put the last two into this. So let's just go through them. The pratyaksha, which we discuss, which is just perception. It could be cognition, it could be hearing, it could be any means of knowing. And there's a category within pratyaksha that it also includes yoga pratyaksha, which will be separate from regular ordinary pratyaksha, like the material world. You can have experiences that are beyond the material nature that can't be fallen directly into these five senses that we call yoga pratyaksha, which is something separate. And then there's anumana, which is reasoning, inference. Upamana, comparison, right? Because or analogy in the sense you compare two things important for purposes to differentiate them, right? And then shabda is also is I would say testimony, any type of testimony that has value and it has authority. And then there is the other ones will be I think that's let me look. I forget the names again. I always forget this, man, because I never use them. Oh, Arthapati, and then there's
Anupalabdhi.
yeah, Anupalabdhi. So Arthapati is basically postulation. What they mean by postulation here is not a hypothesis. It's this idea that you don't know something, but you've basically canceled out every other reason for that thing being the case, and then so that you postulate as being the reason, right, for something occurring, or that experience or whatnot. And then anupalabdhi is basically negation or absence. For example, like, my wife just gave birth, but there's no child there, right? So that lack of or absence where something should be is not there. We can have a cognition of that. So these are the valid means of knowing. So you have any comments on that?
Yeah, the last one, the non-apprehension or anupalabdhi, very interesting. I mean, think about it. When you see something that's not present, how do you know that thing is not there? You see a pot, and uh, somebody comes and he takes the pot away. Now there's absence of pot. How do you see the absence of pot? Because it is not a thing in itself. Your senses cannot interact. So the Indian philosophers came up with anupalabdhi to account for that. They said we are able to comprehend or perceive non-presence or absence. How are we able to do that? We are able to do that through non-apprehension. So they made non-apprehension a means or a faculty of knowledge itself, which is which is wild to think, because they could have simply said the thing is not there. You don't need any corresponding faculty. It's a redundant question. What do you mean by how do we perceive something that's not there? You don't perceive it. But because they were realists, and for realists, most of them, Mimamsakas, Nyayikas, and even Shankara, within Vyavharika, he's a realist. That sounds, he's the, I guess he has his own perennialism going on there, where he wants to have every good thing from every other philosophy. So Shankara says that Shankara kind of accepts that basically. Even he agrees that yes, non-apprehension is a faculty through which you experience absence. So yeah, I think we covered most of the pramanas, and a pramana, pramanya and apramanya. The example is also given in the slide itself. Valid knowledge and invalid knowledge. Uh, Very interesting. Just to comment before we move on to some other slide. So the Nyayikas, the Nyaya philosophers are externalist. In Western epistemology, you have internalist and the externalists. The internalists argue that justification accrues to a proposition through your belief state. Meaning, if, let's say, Vinit holds that P is the case, P should be justified by another belief, not by experience, not by a process, not by anything external to the subject, to the pramatra. So it is his cognitive state, a different cognitive state, or a dosastic state, which is another belief state, which would come to validate the prior belief state. So if I hold P is the case, the world is real because of the belief that my senses are veridical, or they are, they are most of the time they show what reality is. But then this belief would require another belief. That belief would require another belief ad infinitum. So this is the problem with internalism, which argues that your justification should be given internally. Nyaya takes the opposite view. And most of Indian philosophy takes an opposite view. They take the externalist view, where the doshas and the gunas means the virtues of your faculty, of your cognitive faculty, is what provides justification, not a prior belief state. So my perception can be veridical because my eyesight is reliable, or my cognitive faculties are reliable. And the regress, the chain of demanding more justification ends there. Had it been a belief state that was justifying this belief state in the reality of the world, then somebody could ask what justifies this belief state, and then it would lead to infinite regress. But because Indian philosophers are externalist, they can say, dude, if we give you an external process like the reliability of my senses, then the debate kind of ends there. The justification has been provided. Any further demand for justification is unnecessarily stretching it's quibbling basically. Vitanda.
Vitenda.
That's
I
the
love that one. My mom and dad used to call me that. They were like, all I would do was Vitenda Vada. So I was like, but yeah, that's a good point. About the externalist versus internalist. And I think we'll get to that in the next slide right now, because I think we just discuss the Western concept of justified true belief. This is their foundation for their most of their epistemological positions here of what would be considered valid. So let's get to that. This is the one, right?
Yep.
All
This
right.
is the one.
So the JTB, justified true belief. It's interesting. We don't have the sense of belief in the Indian system too, but that's yeah.
So when I mean I had you guys also must have heard Sadhguru saying, for truth, what is verified directly or what is true does not require belief. Western philosophy says no, you're wrong. In order that I should be able to credit you knowledge, the first condition is you should have a belief regarding a proposition, right? You can't just say that you don't believe what you know. No, the Western philosophy says you must believe what you know. If you do not believe what you know, then I can't credit knowledge to you. You're a machine then. You're like ChatGPT. How can I say Mukunda possesses knowledge if whatever that he said was algorithmic, meaning it was pre-programmed in his system. He didn't really consciously believed in it. Let's say he says, let's say if I say the king of France is bald, right? He doesn't have hair. This proposition, if it does turn out, obviously in our actual world there is no king of France, but let's say in a possible world where we exist, there is a king of France, and I say that I know that he is bald. In order that, let's say it turns out true, in order that people should credit me with knowledge, the condition is if I had believed in the proposition. If I never believed in it, and if I just said it like reflexively, then I cannot be credited with knowledge. Until I hold the belief in a proposition, I cannot have knowledge. So, contrary to what people say that you don't have to believe what you know, Western philosophy or epistemology says you must believe what you know. Belief is the prior requisite. And then comes the second condition, which is, so there are three conditions under which you can credit someone with knowledge. You can attribute knowledge to a person. You can say that this so-and-so person knows, is when he has a belief. The belief turns out to be true, and he also provided justification for it. Take an example where you said that tomorrow it will rain. Guys, make sure that you get your umbrella tomorrow because it's going to be a heavy downpouring, and it turns out to be true. But you didn't give any justification. Can we say you had the knowledge? You can't, because it was a guess, and it coincidentally happened to be true. So to rule out theoretical luck or these kind of coincidences, Western philosophers thought that we require another condition, which is the justification condition. Unless an agent provides all these three conditions, under no circumstances you can say he had or he possesses knowledge. So these are necessary, and together they are sufficient.
Yeah. So here, the truth proposition here is about a valid argument, correct? That where the premises lead to the conclusion, correct? It's not about the experience or the transformative nature of a thing, right? Which I think is the difference in the Indian side. The Indian side, the reason belief doesn't matter is because I've experienced it. I mean, whether or not I believe it's true or not doesn't matter. I've experienced it. There's a reality to that experience. Now, knowledge in the Indian side is that which causes transformation, right? Can actually affect the world, right? This rope snake demarcation that later is talked about is when first observing the item on the ground, I think it's a snake, and then so I react, and then I upon inspection I discover it's a rope, and I am different from that. That entire experience has changed me, has caused some sort of transformative nature of my state of awareness, right? More so than anything. The Western side is not as much concerned about the experiential nature of knowledge. They're concerned about the propositional nature of knowledge. Like I haven't learned anything. I've just accepted claims. You see, I think that's where I see the big difference. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Kong, do you want to say something about it?
Yeah. So I mean, I always have this interesting dilemma. Let's say. I don't want to call it dilemma, but rather something I needed more clarity to pass out. So when Western epistemology talks about belief, right? So in order for means for you to have knowledge, the proposition that you're saying it's true, it's justified, you must primarily believe in that proposition, right? Now, how are they defining belief over here? Is this like a internal assertion that this proposition is real, or is it more of the fact that I experience this as true? Because 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 as I said, a lot of people might say that, well, I don't believe it. There's no like kind of internal faith in that proposition per se, but I know in the sense that this is how it is, right? That there's no kind of, let's say, if I may try to use a very loose word, there's no kind of just mental holding on to the proposition per se. It's just like a realization, direct realization that yes, it's true. There's no other way it could be, right? So how why do we like what's the role of belief over here, Benit, if you could like pass it out?
Yeah, go ahead, Vinith.
Yeah, if you could quickly reiterate the last point. How are we sure about the beliefs?
Yeah, so it would be in short like how are we defining belief over here, and what's
Yeah,
the nature of belief
great.
in
Yeah,
in,
great.
in this situation, like because for a
Yeah,
normal lay epistemology guy, right? And I mean, I hear it a lot of time in Indian skeptic circles, right? That I don't need to believe it, I know it. There's no belief in this. I don't believe in the theory of evolution or something. Like I don't believe that the earth is flat. I know it, right? There's no
yeah,
kind of faith in it, right? So how do you parse it out from that, like the very common sense view to a more sophisticated understanding?
yeah. Glad that you asked it. So we can say X believes P, if and only if there's something in his mental state which holds the content of the proposition P. So if while I'm saying I know P, at the time of saying P, I consciously hold the content of P as my mental state and affirm it, right? That is what a belief is. The lay people, when they say you don't need to know what you believe, they do not mean belief in this sense. For them, what belief is devoid of knowing. So for them, belief is something which you hold prior to verification or until verification. Once it has been verified, it is no more a belief. The Western epistemology doesn't see belief in this way. Belief is a mental state. Even after verification, if someone asks you, what have you verified? And if the person says, I have verified so and so proposition, at the moment of saying that proposition, if he has a mental state or a conscious state in himself, which he is affirming, then he is affirming a belief. That is exactly what we mean, or what the Western epistemologists mean by belief. But these lay folks, or general people, when they say that you don't need to know what you believe, you don't need to believe what you know. They basically demarcate belief from that which has been verified. So belief is restricted for all uh, premonitions of truth, basically. Premonitions of something that has been established or something that is going to be established. So until it has been established, it is a belief. Once it has been established through either your prataksha or any other means, or through Shabda Pramana, no more belief. It's like evident. But for Western epistemology, even evident things needs to be processed through a subject, conscious subject, As long as it will be processed as a belief, as a conscious affirmation. I hope that answers it, or that at least
Yeah, it helps. It helps a lot to understand like how the meaning of belief is different, or operates in different modes of conscious thought. I guess within the Western understanding, it's more about the internal perception that you're having of that content of proposition at the moment you're affirming, right? So for that you must believe, in the sense you must have uh, you must state, or you must have an internal positive state towards the proposition having, or the content of the proposition being true, having a truth value, right? Because unless you do that, then it's like chopping off the branch you're sitting in, right? You must accept its validity, or its existence, in the sense that it refers to something true out there, before it can launch out, right? It is kind of built into the very structure of having that proposition and then affirming it, right? I mean, if I could,
yeah. I mean,
pass it.
yeah.
I have a
How can
question
you
on
have-
this. So,
Yes.
so my question is, I think there's an inherent sense, and maybe you could tell me I'm wrong, is when we say belief here, you said earlier, it's not like a belief that I think this exists, not like that, but it's more of like, I believe in my knowledge state or whatever. Would that be fair? Or that somehow this particular proposition is true, right? Would that be right? That I believe it's true, and then I discover it's true, and then that's justified. Is that how that works?
So your discovery of something as true, does that work as a justification?
Yeah.
That does, yeah. That does.
So the
So-
question is, what if I believe something, but it's not true? Well, actually, let's say, what if there's a truth that I don't believe, but it still changes me? But I still, like, what I mean by that is, it still acts out on me, right? Like, I have to think about this idea, because I think I'm trying to pull on this fact that why is the belief necessary there anyway? And who holds that belief? And why does it matter if you hold that belief?
I mean, let's examine it with our own terminology. So, when can you say someone has prama? If he does not know the prameya, if he does not, his mode of consciousness, one of the modes of his consciousness does not hold prameya at the time of affirming whatever proposition he is affirming, can we say he has prama or valid knowledge? The knowledge attribution requires that he knows the prameya. And the only way he can know the prameya is by holding it as a belief form. Right? So if I have this phone in my hand, if I say the phone exists, the phone exists, right, could be a prama. It could be a valid knowledge. The phone itself is prameya, the object of knowledge.
Sure.
But it becomes an object of knowledge to pramantra, or the observer, the subject, right? Only when he holds it as one of his modes of consciousness or modes of thinking. And what is a mode of thinking other than belief? So at the time of saying this phone exists,
What do you mean by mode of thinking?
mode of thinking is basically your cognition for the time being is focused or is restricted or is funneling through a particular content. So at the moment
are you
of
saying
saying,
are you using that word like awareness?
yeah, let's call it awareness. So you have to be aware of the prameya at the time of asserting something about it. So if I say the phone exists, I must be aware of the prameya as a mental state, right? As a conscious state. That is a belief. What in this, I mean, in the context of JTB analysis, this is how they understand belief. But then this is not the understanding of belief which common folks generally have. For them, belief is something that you have about a thing prior
Right.
to its verification.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So, so there's a sense in which they say that, you can get a reasonable idea why they say that you cannot believe what you know. Because if you say you believe what you know, then you're in a state of contradiction. You're saying, I know it has been verified, but then I'm saying it has not been verified. Therefore, then belief is different from something that has been verified for the common folks.
Yeah. So in this sense, what you're saying in the belief side is, say this phone, there's a belief, I take this to be true and real. Right?
The JTV analysis will say that, yes, you also simultaneously hold it as a belief. It is not
Okay.
just a belief. It is not just a belief. But then you first have to hold it as a belief in order that me, Vinit, can say that Mukunda has knowledge.
Yeah.
Otherwise, how can I attribute knowledge to you if you do not hold some content about Pramana?
So this is where I struggle, because it's like this idea, I mean, it's still this is a mental state, right? Like connected to the mind, right? This sense that this is real or not real, or whatever it is. But I have to, I mean, although we want to get past the idea of belief, I can take the position from my own like sense that I'm not sure if this is real, right? Does that mean that I don't believe it's real? Does it not believe I don't believe it's unreal? Like in epistemological context, like I can look at something and be like, oh, maybe that's not real. But that's, I mean, what's that put the belief state as, right? Like, at least within the Indian framework, this idea of awareness is not something I choose. Awareness is where my attention goes, right? It's not any set. It's not a sense I have about the world. It's just where I focus the experience of anything, right? Like it's instead of having a broad light, have a spotlight. That's what awareness is that focus of that attention, right? So in that context, like this idea of belief, I think is, again, I mean, when you put it in the Indian context, it's not really anything to do with consciousness. It's not anything to do with knowing. It's simply a state of the mind, right? Like, so I don't know how that's valid for anything, at least from the Indian worldview. Is like this. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, very quickly. So a lot of people don't mention this, and this is, I mean, this would be, it would enlighten your, this particular line of reasoning. You would be able to understand why the Westerners are. I mean, you're kind of able to see that they are conflating belief with mental state with consciousness. And you're right. This is what Western philosophy of mind does. So in Western philosophy of mind, they do not distinguish like us between mind and consciousness. For them, what is mental is conscious, conscious is mental. But for the Indian philosophers, a mental state is not something that also has a parallel with the conscious state. So you can be in a mental state without necessarily experiencing it in your consciousness. Take, for example, deep sleep. While you're in deep sleep, the mind may be working, right? The samskaras are there. You can't say the mind is not working, because as long as samskaras are there, vrittis are there. But you're still not aware, because the consciousness for that time being, there's a lacuna that has appeared for that interval between consciousness and the mind. So this is something, it's a very salient distinction between Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy of mind. A lot of people don't talk about this. They probably have not figured it out, but I was able to see why are Westerners conflating consciousness with mind when Descartes says cogito ergo sum. Why is he putting it as a thought? Why it's not a thought. For Shankara, the experience of ahankara is not a thought. If you say it is a thought, then he'll say, how can a thought be certain? Because thought is the content of experience.
Yeah.
Ahankara is prior to that. So it can never be experienced. So he would although agree with Descartes, but he will say uh, it is not. You shouldn't put it as I think, therefore I am. No,
I
it should be
know.
like
I
I know
know.
or I'm aware. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would agree there, because like this idea, this is why I think like the Indian system does do better, because what matters is it a valid cognition? Who cares what your belief on a thing is? Like, for example, like I think an example can be, because most of the time when they use these valid, justified true belief, it's about propositions. It's not about experience. Again, it's just about, is that tree exist? So I have to have the belief the tree exists, and then can I know it? Is it true? Yes, it's true. Therefore, it's justified, right? So that's how they approach it. It's like the propositional statement. Whereas I think in the Indian sense is, well, I experience it, so it doesn't matter if it's a belief or not. The question is it true? Okay, we talk about real versus true, right? Is it, the experience is real? Is it a valid or true experience? That's all it is. Meaning, when we say true experience, what we mean is, it says comport with reality. Is it, vertical to reality? Not vertical, but vertical to reality, right? So I think it's separate. I think they're talking separately about separate things, actually. That
Yeah.
where the Indian system is actually trying to engage with the world as the world, and I think the justified true belief analysis is about propositions about the world.
I mean, yeah. Given that distinction, if we put that distinction in the foreground, you're you're right, and this is such a very important analysis that we need to do before taking these things up and concluding about them. Uh, because having laid out this distinction between consciousness and mind, now we can understand why would an Indian philosopher say that you cannot believe what you know, because the knowing is being done by consciousness, not the mind. So if it is being done by the mind, then sure, you have to have the proposition as a belief state in order to affirm anything about it. But if it is being done by consciousness, which works through, uh, it works through a paroksh anubhuti, basically, which is
Right.
direct experience. The consciousness directly experiences, apprehends the content, be it of the mind or the external world. There is no mediation. So in that case, you can't attribute belief. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's what it is. It's the Western thought, at least this particular analysis of justified true belief, is about propositions, language about the world, or these, whatever. And the Indian thought is about, do we know true things? That's it. Are our cognitions valid? And if our cognitions are valid, then it's about flowing from that, right? Then the things you say about it can be valid. Then the experiences you can have from it are valid. So it's a different standpoint. It's not about what you say. It's, are we having valid experiences?
Yeah. So another very important thing that can be immediately concluded. Uh, so for Indian philosophers, let's say truth or knowledge has to be unmediated, right? Anything that is
Unmediated?
unmediated, it should be immediate.
Yeah, I think that's,
If,
well, I mean, yeah.
and that's why knowledge
yeah,
for
I think that's
the
fair.
Indian philosophers cannot be propositional.
Correct. Yeah.
All propositional knowledges are mediated; they are not immediate.
Except for
Wait.
Shabda. Indian Shabda is allowed.
But even then, that has to be worked out through sadhana and led to a direct experience of it.
Well, no, because I mean, they accept Shabda as Shabda. It's mediated knowledge, but the source is accepted, right? The authoritative source. So it's a trustful source, valid source. They're historically, shown to be truthful and not only truthful but conveying truth properly, right? So, like, it's the equivalent to me saying, "Hey, Vinith, I just came from your house. Your house is on fire," right? Because I said it, you might run and go check on it and try to do something. But let's just say some some random idiot comes to you who's crazy and has history of like hallucinations. It's like, Vinith, your house is on fire. You'll be like, okay, I don't know if I believe you, right?
Yeah.
So it's because you have a sense of hopefully you have a sense I'm truthful. Maybe you're like, no, this guy's a liar, or whatever. But you're more likely to accept testimony or statements from people that you find honest, truthful, present the information well, and have direct experience of the thing, right? Than you are to people that aren't those things. So in that same kind of analogy, right, the testimony or shabda is considered authoritative for knowledge of Brahman and of Dharma because you don't know it directly. It's mediated. Your knowledge of these things is mediated. Now, you could justify it later through experience. You are correct insofar as to say that you take these positions starting off as true, like just or you just follow the path. Like I don't know if the Vedas will give me knowledge, but let me just do the action, and then from that moment is like I do the action, and then does the action lead to the pala? Right. This is the Mimamsa theory. The Mimamsa theory is just do it. Like yes, the texts say you'll get this pala, but you do the action and let's see if you get the pala.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So should we next slide?
Yeah. Let's go to the next slide.
While we're there, KingKong, any thoughts?
No, I would reserve my thoughts for till the next slide. I mean,
Okay.
I would after that want to discuss more about Shabda and all that.
Okay. And there we go. And this one, right?
Oh yeah. Then this is very important. So you would see how this has a very striking, or it's almost a carbon copy of what some other Indian philosopher did 1,000 years ago. Sri Harsha brought these kind of cases exactly, which Gautier brings to discredit or denounce JTB analysis. So Sri Harsha's opponent were the Nyayikas. In the Western context, Gautier takes the traditional proponents of traditional epistemology as his target. He says that fine, you say that knowledge is justified true belief, each one of them are a necessary condition, together they are sufficient to produce knowledge. But what if I can bring you cases where I can show all these conditions were met, and yet you would desist, you would hesitate from attributing knowledge? So I've taken the most simplistic example. This is the example of a clock. Let's say you're strolling in a park and you come across a stuck clock that is kept at the base of the tree. And unknowingly to you, in reality, the time was 3 o'clock afternoon. On the clock as well, it had stuck right at 3 o'clock noon. That is what the reading was. You saw the clock and you made a proposition, oh, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Can we say you had knowledge? Gautier says all the criteria, all the conditions are fulfilled. You form the belief is there, that it is also true. At the time when you saw the clock, in the clock, although it is broken, it is stuck, it was showing 3 o'clock, but coincidentally, it had matched with the real time, the standard time of that place where you were, which was 3 o'clock, right? So you also had the truth, and you also had the justification, which was prataksha of the clock. So all these three conditions are met. Can we say you had knowledge? Intuitively, you still would hesitate from attributing knowledge because you can immediately see that there is involvement of luck. So Gautier argues that justification was brought in by Western epistemologists to ward off luck or coincidence, but there can be cases where even with the presence of all these three conditions, there is still coincidence or luck lurking or hovering over all these cases, or all these justifications. So in that case, your definition of knowledge is insufficient because it leaves out a lot to be desired. That's his pushback, basically, which was felt like a shock in the entire Western world of philosophy, and philosopher immediately scrambled to, reply whatever that they could to this article that was published by Gautier in 1963. Some of them came up with additional conditions to kind of solve the problem, but even now in contemporary philosophy, it is relevant, it is debated, and it is often used to cast doubt on this conventional traditional analysis of knowledge, which we just saw in the previous slide, the JTB analysis. Yes, guys. So
That's
what do you guys think?
interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I have not read Gettier, so I actually don't know. I should maybe take a look at that. That's
Yeah,
I
let's
mean,
think about it for
yeah. I mean, thinking about this, yeah, that makes total sense, right? Like, I mean, yeah. I mean, the timing issue is one, right? I look at the clock's broken, but I think it's 10:10. I believe it's 10:10. It is 10:10 on the clock. I'm technically justified true belief, so that knowledge must be real. But in fact, it's not 10 o'clock, right? It's in the real world. It's not 10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock on the thing. So I don't actually have any knowledge, even though the conditions are met.
or to kind of strengthen the example, let's say in the real world as well it is 10:10. Now what? So the belief is also true, and then you have a justification as well. So all the conditions are met, solidified. Even then, can you say the person had knowledge? Well, we can't, because the source through which he made the proposition, it is 10:10, was because had it been some other situation, let's say he had come right on that spot 5 minutes later,
Sure.
then the time was showing 10:10 in the clock, but in reality it was 10:15. So his coming to knowledge was purely coincidental. It was purely out of luck. Coincidentally, he happened to see the clock at 10:10, which matched with the real world time as well. And this is the more stronger version of the example. Even if you take the weaker version, where let's say it did not match with the real world time, but to him at least the clock was showing 10:10. So the justification is there. He had no reason to doubt the clock. So it is true belief, and he holds it as a belief. So JTB analysis satisfied, JTB condition satisfied, yet we can't say knowledge is being produced. So what do we do now? Do we make more conditions? Do we put more conditions there, or do we change something in the conventional analysis? And that was left for the later philosophers to do. And so far,
Yeah.
it is still debatable.
Yeah,
Upward.
I need to look more at this because it's very interesting. I've never really thought about the JTB as being a valid means of having knowledge. I just thought it was, again, justification for knowledge or propositions about knowledge. So for me, yeah, this is fine. Like, I never thought that'd give you knowledge anyway.
But there's something more interesting. If we can go to that Sri Harsha slide.
Oh yeah,
Now,
yeah. Is that the
yeah,
last slide before? Or I mean, I have it all.
it
I'm
was
just
the last.
asking. Yeah, okay.
Perhaps
Let
it
me
was the last slide.
here because the next
Now
slide
take,
is.
yeah,
Oh no, this is Nyaya comparing. You want the Sri Harsha one?
the Sri Harsha one.
Okay.
Probably the last. It was the last one of.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do that then.
All right. Now look at the coincidence, and not the coincidence, but look at how visionary some of our philosophers were. So we saw the Gautier cases, right? Now let's see the Sri Harsha cases. And remember, Gautier argued, and I don't know, I don't want to make a conjecture that he might have read some book on Sri Harsha, or may have read a translation of Sri Harsha's Khandan Khand Khadya. That might be a possibility because of the starking similarities between the kind of reasoning that they are making. So Sri Harsha, before 1,000 years before Gautier, made the exact same argument against Nyaya definition of knowledge. Nyaya's definition of knowledge can be brought down to JTB analysis. You could roughly say that for Nyayikas, You can attribute knowledge if the person has a belief and the belief corresponds to reality, right? So if someone has true belief, then they have knowledge. Sri Harsha comes on the fore, and he argues he's basically charging, assaulting this definition. He wants to uproot it to establish that no definition work. You cannot talk about what knowledge is. Epistemology is a hopeless project. In order to do that, he brings up comes up with a couple of cases, like Gautier cases. We have Sri Harsha cases. He says, let's say a person sees in a distant mountain a plume, right? A smoke, a mist. He does not know that there's a smoke, right? No, he does not know it is a mist. He thinks it is a smoke. And there actually is a fire on the mountain. He doesn't know about it. Seeing the plume, seeing the mist, he makes the deduction that because he is aware of wherever there is smoke, there is fire, he immediately concludes, oh wait, there is a plume on that mountain, therefore there must be a fire there. Coincidentally, like in the Gautier case, the mountain does have a fire. So therefore it also would have a smoke behind the mist, behind this plume that he is experiencing. So there is a smoke. He's not seeing the smoke. He's seeing the plume. He's seeing the mist. Seeing that, he makes the deduction there must be a fire because he confuses the plume that he's experiencing with the smoke. So he makes the deduction that there must be a fire. The deduction turns out to be true because there is a fire. Sri Harsha asks, now because he has a true belief, can we say he has knowledge as well? The answer is again no, because him coming to his conclusion coming to be true is purely coincidental. Had it been some other mountain where there was a mist, his conclusion, his deduction would have misfired completely, because that mountain would not have fire, and so it would also not have smoke behind the mist. So this was such a strong attack that the Nyayikas had to change their entire philosophy, at least the core of their philosophy, and they had to, that kind of birthed the analytical shades in Indian philosophy that we see, which was already there, but they tightened they were forced to tighten their strings basically, and that's how you see, that's how Navya Nyaya was born, because they felt we need to respond to Harsha's criticism, to Khandan Khand Khadya, and then comes Gangesh Upadhyay to answer these problems or conundrums that Sri Harsha was posing. The conclusion was basically exactly what Gautier would conclude 1,000 years later, that even though the conditions are there, true belief and justification, you can't say it is knowledge. Take another example. Let's take the mirage example. So you're seeing this mirage in a desert. The justification is there, right? The perception is there. This is the justification. And the belief is there as well. But you're seeing, let's say you're seeing water. You're seeing puddles, right? You're seeing a puddle, right? And there happens to be a real puddle which you're not seeing. The senses are not interacting with the real puddle. They are, however, seeing a projection of it. But there happens to be a real puddle as well. You go to that place quickly and you try to drink it, right? You try to wash your face with it. You figure out, you successfully are able to, you're able to do what you wanted to do. You're able to use it. So your experience turns out to be true. There is a puddle. You're able to collect the water and wash your face. But what you saw was a mirage. But behind the mirage, there was a puddle. Now, the truth is there. The belief is there. The justification is there. Sri Harsha again asks, can you say it is producing knowledge? The answer is again no, because it was coincidental. It could have been the case that next time you experience the puddle, there was no real puddle behind the illusion of it. In that case, you wouldn't be able to say that you had knowledge. So this is how he demolishes the entire Pramana theory of the Nyaya and pushes them to the margins where they had to come back again with Navya Nyaya.
Yeah, because he spends a lot of time attacking definitional concepts and
Yes.
reason as a means to know anything at a deep level, right? Because Nyaya theory at that time was this subject to object contact, produce valid knowledge, and he was like, "What does contact mean? What's a subject? What's an object?" And he would basically much like he would use similar to Prasanga method of attacking like Chaturshkorti or whatever that Nagarjuna did. He would just tear apart Nyaya's definitional world. And he wasn't saying that you can't have knowledge or nor that perception doesn't exist. He was just saying the framework we're postulating is at the ultimate base nonsensical. Like, because you're right. Because the question is, well, I saw the mirage, I tasted the water, and that must be true knowledge. But no, that's not, because your mirage that you saw, even though it happened to have water there, not because of the mirage itself, because there's water behind it, is that particular knowledge base didn't produce knowledge because it's particularized. It happened to be the case there was water, you drank the water, and you had that experience. So I think that, again, the idea is, and then Navya came back and said, they restructured their entire methodology around not addressing necessarily the pure definitional nature of reasoning here. KingKong, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the example is a bit interesting, I would say. Like, I mean, if I can, take a pushback to Sri Harsha, that couldn't the Nyaya school attack Sri Harsha back and say, well, so, if there's a fire in the mountain, veritably there would be smoke. We see that. And within the cognition of that man, the appearance of the mist and the appearance of the smoke would be different in its manifestation, or would appear differently, right, in plain sight. And we know this by seeing such scenarios in the real world, or in the case of mirage. I mean, I don't know, like, whether there can be like mirages or like puddles and stuff, but like, I think they could say that if that such a case can't be possible, and because, well, the inference would be there. Sri Harsha can, of course, critique that in a different way. I'm not denying it, but so that's where I think. I mean, how would you answer that?
Yeah. So I mean, the Navanyayas, what they ended up doing. So Nyaya was not as early Nyaya was a little vaguer and more generalized. Navanyaya came back and became almost analytical, right? So they developed way more concepts, Dravya, Hetu, all these different things connected to any particular observation or proposition or whatever. So they responded by basically saying, no, Sri Harsha, your arguments work because there was vagueness in the past, and you were attacking definitions. We're going to go analytical. We're going to go deep, look at every little detail here. And that detail is where they kind of rebuild their system from. Right. So like they will talk about, like, if you talk about a pot, what is the nature of the pot? The pot has the not only, so previously I would say it had clayness, but what does clayness mean? Right. So Navya would be like, okay, there is substance to it, there is texture, there is a bunch of other things, and they would lay it out in a much more analytical fashion, so each of the points that Harsha brought up were addressed.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we're got to the end of epistemology. Now I know how I know everything, and I guess I'm a Sarvagnya at this point. Just kidding. All right. Any other, go ahead.
Compared to the mess that, apologies again, I created in the beginning, this entire live went very rigorous. I'm glad we were able to discuss a lot of things, and surely it is on me. I'll make sure that I cut those things out in the edit. Let's see.
Yeah.
Something best.
I think this was great. It was a great conversation. I mean, we had decent showing. I think about like max out. We got like 80 people watching at once, which is, it's not bad. And
Oh, it's crazy, Mukunda, because when I was opening it through my laptop, I was seeing like 7 people. I don't know why it's like, was it probably giving it the viewer list a particular slice of the timeline?
so yeah, I'm like live streaming on 3 platforms, I guess, or 4 now. Vinit's, Mirror Media on X, Mirror Media on Facebook, and then Mirror Media on YouTube. So across all platforms, we're about 76, which is not bad, right?
Right.
And we'll, over time as we do more of these, hopefully people care to come in, listen, and engage with us in a more interesting way and come up and ask questions. But maybe it also requires us to do something. I mean, first of all, epistemology for most people, they don't know anything about this. Like they don't know anything about Pramana. So like for them to come and jump in. But if we come and talk about, let's talk about something more like the Gita or attack Muslims, which I don't really want to do, but like, we can attack, we can attack their arguments. There we'll probably get like 100, 200 people here or something like that.
I mean, eventually, go on.
No, so in short, if we do have time, I just wanted to like go quickly over, like again, I mean, we can do a separate like stream for this, like the nature of Shabda and in the domain in which Shabda operates, how the pramatas of Shabda gets it, what kind of pratyaksha, and again, these are different topics, but in short, if you could just go on the nature of Shabda, if it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we kind of dealt with it earlier.
If it's not, I think if you think that it's going to be very quick or brief and it wouldn't do justice to the topic, we can do it next week just on Shabda. Then maybe we can elongate it with the Mimamsaka's view on that and how different schools perceive Shabda Vedas and all.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good point. We can jump into the Mimamsa idea of Shabda and its status, like Apodusheya versus non-Apodusheya, and then look at how the Nyaya approach that differently. Because Shabda it's almost as like robust as they go into for Pratyaksha. It's just Anumana is like a smaller portion of most of these people's commentaries. A lot more is focused on Pratyaksha and Shabda. So yeah, actually that makes sense. What do you think, Vinit? Yeah, Vinit, what's your thought? You want to cover Shabda now, or do you want to wait till like next week?
I mean, whatever like you guys collectively think. If we have time, we can cover it now. Kong would be the one presenting it.
Yeah, I'd say let's do next week because we're already like 2.5 hours in, almost.
And
so
then, let's keep it till 2.5 hours, and we can keep an entire 2.5 hours episode on how Shabda revelation, what are the modes and different schools, how they see it, all of that, right?
Yeah,
we would have more time for to go.
And let's also bring into fore here some of the hermeneutics around like Adi Devik, Adi Bautik, Adi Atmik, Adi
that
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because hopefully this will help. The next one can help people respond back to the Dawa bros and their literal reading of text that they don't understand and grasp.
Or even the hermeneutical intricacies that goes into understanding Shabda.
Yeah, great. Okay, guys, anything else? And then we'll wrap it up.
I mean, not on the topic itself, but what do you think? Like, should we, now that we have done one video on epistemology and it's out of the way, where should we be heading? Like, in the future, should we go back to analyzing different concepts of God and start?
Yeah, we can jump all over the place because at the end of the day, this is not like a lecture series. This is a discussion. Yeah, so we can jump wherever we want to jump. people can join us. The beauty of the internet and this is, the videos will be however people want to listen to them.
Yeah, so I think it's time. Let's from next week onwards, or maybe after next week, we should start this interfaith analysis as well. Let's jump into it. Finally, address the elephant in the room, and let's see, how we analyze Christianity, Islam, and
Yeah.
our own views as well. Let's call them up for a discussion in the audience or from some other platform if they're interested.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm down with that. We're going to be respectful always. We're going to be
Absolutely.
we have no desire to hurt or harm anyone in that way. We're just following our dharma.
Yeah, it will it will be from good faith. I mean,
Yeah.
trying to understand their worldview, trying to
Yeah.
bridge the gap, this conversational gap that is there.
Well, great guys. This has been great, fantastic. Appreciate it. Audience, thank you guys for listening. Hopefully this is worth your time and energy. And we had some technical difficulties in the beginning. It won't happen again. We'll resolve it. We're good. So thank you. Anything else, Vinit, KingKong?
No, thank you. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned. A lot of good things will be coming in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
thank
right,
you, guys, both of you, for having this great discussion. It's a good introduction to further topics avenues, and looking forward to more such discussions in the future. Ciao, take care, guys.
Excellent. All right, so we'll go right to the outro music, and you guys can stick around 1 sec.
पावन मुनिजन यमुना तीरे पावन मुनिजन यमुना तीरे गायती वनमाली गायती वनमाली मधुरं गायति वनमाली